Wonder Boy is a confusing series full of localization changes, weird palette swaps, and odd ports. And with several games and franchises born out of the first two titles, the weirdness didn't stop there. Wonder Boy, Super Wonder Boy, Monster Land, Monster World, and now 2 games that share the Wonder Boy 3 title. And up next is Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair.
Westone turned the whole Wonder Boy series on its head by following up the arcade platformer immediately with the action RPG Wonder Boy in Monster Land. That hit arcades in 1987. Following Monster Land's port on the Sega Master System in 1988, the first game to use the Wonder Boy 3 title, known as Monster Lair, hit arcades in 1989. For some reason, Westone once again decided to change directions, kind of taking parts of the original Wonder Boy and smashing together with Monster Land. This combo created a game that is closer to the original title, but follows the story and themes of Monster Land directly. It's platforming, but with swords and magic and stuff. To compound the weirdness, Monster Lair would hit the PC Engine and TurboGrafx 16 before it would even be on a Sega home console, despite being a Sega System 16 arcade game, giving Hudson Soft another Wonder Boy title in another roundabout way. The Mega Drive would finally get a port in 1990 in Japan, 1991 in Europe, and not officially making it to the US until 2009 thanks to the Wii Virtual Console. It later was also part of the Monster World Sega Ages collection in Japan and can now be purchased on Steam.
The most advanced video game system in the universe.
Yes!
Mega Drive from Sega.
The story does actually connect directly to Monster Land. Similar to other RPG-inspired games like the Legend of Zelda series, the exploits of the past heroes keep getting passed down each generation. The heroic deeds of Book and How We Save Monster Land are that of legend, and now our new characters Leo and Popilo, sometimes called Priscilla or Purapril, a name referenced other times in the series, set out to show that they can be just as brave as the legendary hero and fight the monsters invading the land. So as I'm sure you've noticed by now, Monster Lair's combo of side-scrolling action from the original Wonder Boy with a little bit of the fantasy flair of Monster Land somehow created a side-scrolling shooter. Every level auto-scrolls and sort of behaves similar to a classic shooter in that regard. In fact, there are some definite similarities in design and tone to various shooters sometimes lumped together in the subgenre Q-'em-up, such as the Proteus series, which had the first 2 games in the series released sandwiched around the original arcade release and the console ports of Monster Lair, Air Zonk, which arrived a few years later, or the Fantasy Zone games. There are 2 different types of levels that rotate. In the first, your character operates much closer to the original Wonder Boy, just stuck in an auto-scroll level instead. You go to the right and jump over obstacles and enemies and the level pushes you forward. Weirdly, it betrays the feeling of speed set by the original Wonder Boy, even with the level constantly scrolling. It's weird that when Westone created a second game that could capitalize on the mechanics of the original, they just didn't. It feels much more on pace with Monster Land. You move very slowly, the character's jump is anything but impressive, and there's no run function. It is kind of unfortunately slow, honestly.
Where other games in this style succeed by creating some sort of beautiful chaos, Monster Lair is just about a slow walk to the right while eating your fruits and veggies. At least you have a really cool sword that shoots laser beams and such.
The ticking down timer controlled by our hero's hunger for fruit makes a return and is probably the mechanic that ties it closest to the original Wonder Boy. Various food items will appear as you go along depending on the path you take and the enemies you kill. Grab them or you risk losing a life and getting a game over or setting yourself up for failure in the next round. Just like the original Wonder Boy, this is not your health bar. If an enemy hits you, you lose a life. This only changes if they fire a projectile, which causes you to stumble and a chunk of that meter gets shaved off. You wield a weapon like in Monster Land, but you don't need to worry about being in striking distance as your sword always fires some sort of projectile. Like a traditional shooter, you'll come across power-ups to change your weapon a bit, ranging from a spread shot or changing it to something much more explosive. But again, these aren't a traditional power-up. They don't persist until you get hit, grab something else, or lose a life. They just last for a very short period of time. You'll be grabbing these power-ups constantly as they appear what seems like every few seconds and only last for a very brief time. They also don't fire the way you would always assume. The base weapon, for example, either fires a slow and steady shot when holding down the button, or you can just smash the button as fast as you can. But using the rockets as an example, if you try to fire too quickly, it just explodes right in front of you. Holding down the button is the only way it flies all the way across the screen. It is an odd setup and one that often fights my instincts for this kind of gameplay. I want to grab the best power-up and keep a continuous barrage of projectiles filling the screen while moving my character where they need to be. Monster Lair tends to ride that line between fire when you need to and never stop firing to survive, often to its detriment.
もしもし
PC エンジンデュオ R 新発売
NEC
By Hadison.
The enemies in these levels are different depending on the level environment or theme, but you'll see some repeating enemy types. Nothing really stands out, but you'll see a few familiar enemy types if you've ever played the other Wonder Boy games, and I enjoy the style of the designs here. But sadly, most are just roadblocks, especially early on, rather than providing a challenge. This worked fine in Wonder Boy, where speed really kept things going early on before the density of enemies stepped up, but here the game feels a little empty. After you complete one of these stages, you walk into the mouth of a creature and begin the second stage, bringing another element back very reminiscent of the first Wonder Boy and a main staple of the Adventure Island series as well. Now hopping on your dinosaur? Looks like a slowpoke with wings, to be honest. Well, either way, Monster Lair is no longer playing with the ideas of a side-scrolling shooter and just fully embracing it. No more platforming to be found, you'll just fly to the right like any good shooter and face a barrage of flying enemies and some that fire projectiles back. Depending on the level, the enemies are more based on the boss to come, while others are just repeated from the first section. But now they fly in those typical single-file lines and swooping past. All the same weapons and the way they shoot still apply here. The big difference is there is now no food to collect. What you came into this level with is what your meter stays at, and any hits you take from projectiles during the boss fight lowers that meter. This is probably one of the better decisions they made for this game. You can focus on the task at hand without needing to worry about collecting food or about a time limit, but it gives you a drive to have a fully filled gauge before you get here and to keep it that way before the boss. At the end of these levels is where you'll fight the boss, where that cute 'em up feeling I mentioned earlier really shines. These are all very wacky, is how I describe them, such as the giant fish that shoots other small fish at you that are also at scales. That leaves you with a skeleton until it reforms. The level bosses aren't exactly crazy difficult either, but probably offer the most fun of the game, based on their oddball designs and attacks alone.
I feel like the bosses were the true focus of this game and they just built the levels around each one. You could almost call it a boss rush with extra steps, seeing how there's only one true level before the push to the boss.
Plus, they're just the most memorable part of this game. When writing this, I couldn't think of what the enemy types were in each level, but I could certainly remember the weird beehive and then ice monster.
I'm trying not to be too negative against Monster Lair, but I'll just be honest at this point, I can't get into it like I can other games in the series or other games like it. It just seems to be missing something. It's a little hollow or shallow. One of those.
I will give it major props for design though. I do really enjoy the monster designs and the characters are great too. Honestly, the whole game is just nice to look at. Good color choices and not great level designs, but they're still nice. Even though the boss levels are all very samey, it is nice that the previous level design or some new design can be seen in the background scrolling between the walls. And I haven't touched on it really, but it is nice having a fun Wonder Boy experience that is a 2-player game. While it doesn't change much, it is great to have that option and save Monsterland with a friend. Music is awesome as well. This, in my opinion, is where the soundtrack really begins to shine for the Monsterland part of the series. How can you not enjoy fun tracks like this? The soundtrack is just perfectly catchy and has that energy the rest of the game seems to kind of lack. A wide range of some punchy low tones, real twinkly highs, grinding organ sounds, and lots of percussive elements. Shinichi Sakamoto really hit it out of the park with this one. Overall, Monster Lair is a weird one for me. I feel like Westone took a major step back after making the leap into RPG territory, like suddenly they questioned the whole decision and wanted to bring back the original Wonder Boy, but keep the fantasy elements. But with that, they didn't fully grasp the feeling of Wonder Boy, and it suffers for it. I rarely feel like playing it like the other entries in the series, and I rarely put the effort in finishing it when I do.
Again, I know I'm sounding negative here, but I do like Monster Lair, it's just that it's the flattest out of everything in the series. It's great for a quick play or a momentary distraction, just not much else. All the physical editions are easy to come by except for the Turbo CD version, and the easiest way to experience this game is on Steam. Up next, we'll have the classic The Dragon's Trap. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.